Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Could you individually state your name and title for the record?
Marjorie Neff, Chair of the School Reform Commission.
Ori Bonson, Chief Financial Officer for the school district.
Cheryl Logan, Chief of Academic Supports for the school district.
Good morning, Fran Burns, Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. As everybody knows, this hearing was recessed on February 18th after my colleagues expressed interest in gaining more clarity about the state of services within our schools and making sure that we expanded as well district representation at the hearing. This hearing is part of a larger initiative to gain insights into the impact that 5 years of budget cuts have had on education in the Philadelphia School District and how we can look ahead in terms of spending priorities that match community needs and student needs. If it helps, I thought it made sense to update you on our process and findings so far as we transition into the next 5 years to help frame a few things for us. So we have a brief PowerPoint that we're moving through. And my colleagues have the PowerPoints in their packets as well as the maps that we're using. So the process was we've gone through a process in which we've had several hearings hosted by the Children and Youth and Committees on Education. We've had neighborhood education town halls at South Philadelphia High School, Sayre High School, and Edison High School that have been attended by hundreds of Philadelphians, and others have submitted hundreds of community priority forms as well. We've also made sure that we asked for significant data requests from the school district to examine current staffing and access to key services. And I think among the things that Philadelphians, and especially those who are experiencing or live the policies that we create in our schools, have spoken about the most, has been the issue of basic human rights to be recognized. And that is a right that is believed to belong justifiably to every person. We've had the situation where parents and students in Philadelphia, educators have felt deeply wronged by what these budget cuts have done on a daily basis. To them, it impacts deeply not only their academic learning, but their personal well-being and the sense of safety even as soon as they walk into the school building in the mornings. And that given a magic wand to talk about additional funds within the district, many of them are speaking about basic essential resources that are significantly lacking in schools that have a tremendous impact on their sense of safety and well-being in our schools. And that's in part why I've spoken about this issue of not just being what we're held to in terms of just basic constitutional standards, but actual human rights beliefs in schools, and we'll go through that in a significant way. So I wanted to share with the public one of our first maps that I think is one of the most important things, which is what is happening in terms of teaching and learning conditions within our schools. We've discussed the significant impact of teacher vacancies. It's important to understand that teacher vacancies are a set of numbers. They started out with around 200, went anywhere from 150 to 180 currently today, but they impact an estimated 9,600 students over the course of an individual school day. The vacancies also impact the fact that there are 2,000 students in 64 split grade classes in just K-3 alone, which is tremendously significant when we are talking about a literacy initiative that asks us to put every 8-year-old on grade level. Split grade classrooms are those that are forced on schools and teachers. They don't have pedagogical basis. They are primarily used in order to save money or because that there's a lack of teachers to be able to fill out a whole classroom. There seems to be little prep training or extra support for teachers who are in split grade classrooms. And additionally, we've been trying to talk about the issue of overcrowding in schools and what it feels like. It could be 300 high school classes over contractual limits. the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers has talked about nearly 600 classrooms over the limits, that we are seeing significant rises in terms of recognition. I believe that many of us were a little shocked in City Council to hear that the school district was starting to count overcrowding as being at 39 students in a classroom. We do not think that that was something that was commonly agreed upon, recognized, or publicly presented to anybody. And that, in fact, recognizing that the contractual limit of 30 students in K to 3 and 33 in 4 to 12 are exactly that. They are the contractual maximum of students that we want to see. And anything over that is starting to feel crowded. And that is something that many young people spoke to, what it felt like to be in deeply overcrowded classrooms, to not have enough books, to not have enough seating space, to never feel like a teacher could have enough time with you to answer your questions. And to feel the few minutes that you have in a high school biology class, in a classroom of 50, or a gym class of 77, feeling like it just doesn't feel like school anymore. It feels incredibly oppressive and stressful for a lot of young people. The legend in the map that you see there is just alone the split grade classrooms in grades K to 3. And again, we really want to support children's teaching and learning. We want our educators to become fulfilled professionals. Under the Paul Vallis's administration and through the early parts of the Ackerman administration, we had a commitment to end split grades because they were not pedagogically sound practice, and unless that there are pedagogically sound reasons for doing split grades, we wanted to make sure that those were avoided at all costs, particularly for those younger grades, and also encouraging some reflection on the school district about the sudden reemergence and significant rise of 64 split grades, 30 students per grade, is as many as 1,900, 2,000 students who are impacted by this. Our next slide talks a little bit about the Source for Teachers contract, and again about teacher vacancies and about the lack of substitutes in schools. So there are many reasons why a teacher may not be present in a school building, for the fact that we have 10,000, 8,000 or so employees. There's a significant impact, and I know that the district was very serious about trying to address teacher vacancies. But this year, the 2-year, $34 million contract awarded to Source for Teachers to improve the fill rate for substitutes has had a devastating impact on schools all across the city. On average, by January, according to district numbers, only an average of 35 to 45% fill rate, even though the Source for Teachers contract guaranteed 70%. What that means is that we saw thousands of instructional minutes that are lost due to the lack of substitutes in schools. We talked about the safety of students who felt deeply jeopardized when they show up in a classroom and there isn't a teacher in the classroom or on duty because they're running from one place to another. I talked to, and we spoke with principals all over the city who talked about what it felt like to have significant teacher vacancies, substitutes who don't show up, and staff who have to work from morning to the end of the day without a single break, filling up their prep periods, running from classroom to classroom in large high schools, desperately trying to fill in these spots. We wasted countless critical prep periods in schools. I think that many people don't understand how important it is to have prep time and some time to prepare for your next classes when you're an educator, especially when 50% of our teachers are new in our schools or relatively new, have less than 5 years experience. We want them to have the ability to settle down and prepare for their next class, but that can't happen when we've got a contract that is so deeply impacting the ability of teachers to just manage their basic day. The legend that we saw, that you have before you, and the map that is there and is in my colleague's PowerPoint, shows that the dots in green are the only ones in which the substitute fill rate is at 80% or exceeds the Source for Teachers promise. And that everything below that is significantly below 80%, dropping to some schools, which have never seen a substitute come in, 10% in others, but the majority of schools have seen a dramatic impact on their ability to manage the basic operations of a school day. The next finding is about counselors in our schools. Today, we've got 17,000 children in 31 schools that attend schools without a full-time counselor in them. We talk a lot about the needs of our young people. We talk a lot about the needs of young people who live in poverty, young people who experience trauma every day, and what it means to go to a school where there isn't somebody to talk to, that there isn't a designated personnel beyond your teacher who may or may not be there or may not have an overcrowded classroom, but that the counselor has long been seen as an individual within the school that was supposed to respond to the personal, holistic needs of young people. They coordinate care. They're responsible for our homeless youth. They have a significant number of legal responsibilities as well, including placement of children, identification, support services for an IEP process. But the shocking loss of counselors in schools has had a very devastating individual impact on students, as you can see in this one quote from a student at Edison High School who said, "We have a lot to worry about at home and at school. I struggle towards the end of the month. It's hard for me to get my work done and deal with everything at home. I come to school and it's hard to get help. The teachers are doing their best, but I'm tired, and we're all so tired." And that's a student who's talking about that. When we don't have enough educators, you feel like you can't get anywhere. And that's another student who came to one of our town halls. The PFT contract guaranteed one counselor for every school. When the district moved away from the contract, it didn't improve the situation for our young people. And on a critical issue that we speak about consistently, that the school district has held briefings for city council about, making us promises about trauma-informed care, about support services, about improving connections with our city departments. And it's hard to understand how that happens with so many schools without a full-time counselor. Wilson Elementary School has 1,100 kids. Edison High School has 1,250 students. They may have a counselor, but it's certainly not at the levels that we need to be seeing, and at levels that are having tremendous personal, consequences for our young people. The other area that we're looking at is this issue of school nurses. We have talked significantly about what it means to go to school without a full-time nurse. Again, many of us know and talk about young people who live in poverty. We know that young people have such little access to healthcare initiatives that they frequently don't have an ability to get the fullest amount of nutrition, that they may not be able to get their eyesight checked, they may not get dental access, and that the school nurse is a frontline individual. Not only is that individual responsible for proactive identification, but they also dispense medication. They help with children with shocking and vulnerable situations that are happening in their lives. Students come to school with feeding tubes. Students come to school with epileptic fits. Students come to school with asthma attacks and the need for insulin shots to handle their diabetes. And the absence of a school nurse means that somebody else has to pick it up, or that parents have to do it themselves, or that parents don't feel safe. And if there's one area where we heard from parents consistently and significantly, was that the lack of a full-time nurse in school made them feel like they could not send their child to school without feeling that their child would be cared for and safe. We have 64,000 students in 131 schools that do not have access to a full-time nurse. And that the consequences have ranged from students who may miss school and actually can go into the DHS truancy system as a result. We certainly had anecdotal testimony towards that. And on a regular basis, parents who've been called out of work to pick up sick children, 911's been called. These are serious situations that are having financial impact on our city. It's not just about how much it costs to put them in the classroom or in our school buildings. It has tremendous ripple effects as well. We've had a lot of discussion about facilities in schools. We know that this is a huge area, and in fact, Ms. Burns, I know you've been here frequently. We should probably get you a side room here at some point. But we want to recognize the importance of facilities and facilities investments and upgrades in our buildings, many of which average between 50 to 70 years of age. Water fountains was one that was a significant priority for a lot of young people, that this was repeated in multiple schools and high schools across the city. We had a great conversation actually with Ms. Burns and through our water and lead hearings. But we would continue to urge the school district to take a look at this issue of water access and hydration in our school buildings as being something that young people have frequently mentioned as making them feel like they are not valued when that's not readily and clearly available to them. We've requested data for the location and operational status of all drinking water sources in our schools. We've requested information about expanded testing of all water in Philadelphia Public Schools. We have a commitment from the district to create a new inventory and to potentially retest representative water sources, but hope that we can also continue with that conversation, knowing what's moving. And then as we talk about what we found, I also want to take a moment to take a look forward at what the district has planned as it looks at its future. So the district has moved forward with a 5-year plan for additional spending. We should correct this because it's not a surplus, it's called a fund balance. Those are also important to retain and uphold. But the district does have an $88 million fund balance as of FY15. We'll, I'm sure, hear updates about where FY16 is headed. There's a slight increase from the state for this year. And that as we look forward, that this budget is an important opportunity for any spending plan to reflect both community priorities for our schools, as well as the restoration of essential services, and to make sure that they line up with the district priorities. So the district has elaborated on a number of its priorities for spending, including literacy initiatives, an instructional materials refresh, turnaround schools, literacy coaches. It's looked at college and career readiness and labor in the workforce. The college and career readiness has mentioned tech refresh, high school labs, AP courses in gifted ed, and summer enrichment as well. But as we take a look at some of the district priorities, one of the questions that we're going to want to make sure that we ask is how they match up with what the community priorities have talked about. Whether these are system-wide improvements that will touch every child at every school, which many schools and individuals feel does not currently happen. Does it make sense in terms of how we're addressing actual students' needs? I know that there's a lot of interest around the summer enrichment and AP courses, but there's also a real need from a lot of teachers' perspectives to deal with strengthening our current curriculum, making sure that we're fulfilling our curriculum on every level. If there's any plan for remediation and smaller class sizes to help support young people. And how other types of things around CTE and diversifying our outcomes and understandings for young people can improve. And district priorities for the future have mentioned additional things such as the Summer Institute program, in the future, the elimination of split grade classrooms, reading specialists. But one of the things that we tried to highlight here is that those may not necessarily be additional investments, that if we're talking about a district that is on track to having every child on grade level by K to 8, to put so many thousands of students into split grade classrooms, to not have them be on level, to lack supports for those teachers, that we need to really think about whether those should be additional investments for later or how they're being prioritized for now. And then, of course, we have our FY 2017 concerns that are also looming. So we see just for next year, $121 million being spent in additional charter costs, $23 million for turnaround, which I think my colleague and co-chair, Councilwoman Blackwell, has a lot of questions about how it actually reflects a significant, consideration towards improvement of schools. 3 new Renaissance charter conversions, which are being proposed with no clarity about the financial impact on the rest of our district schools. And of course, a plan to close 3 schools annually starting in FY18 with no clear end. And then we have our community priorities on the other end of it, what it means to restore essential services back to schools, to serve all children equitably across the system, not for some kids at the expense of others, but to really look at what it means to restore teachers back to our classrooms, to ensure counselors at every single district school, to make a promise that the issue of school nurses, which the district has been great about making a commitment towards, is not dependent on the governor's budget, but is in fact guaranteed for every parent to feel like they can send their child to school safely, that books and supplies are being paid attention to, that we're having a conversation about facilities and water access, that we're talking about what it means to invest in the personnel to ensure climate and safety, and also an area that has gotten shortchanged recently is to ensure that we're talking about supports for our special education population and our English language learner population. Those are 2 high-need populations that frequently go unmentioned around some of our specific needs and priorities, but are significant in terms of their representation within the school district. So 10% of our families are of our student population are English language learners, but of course, as anybody in the school district knows, they're highly concentrated in particular schools, and many of the families, Furness, which may have almost 40%, almost 1 in 2 students who are new immigrants and English language learners feel like they're getting such little academic and support services, despite the fact that they're serving such a different diverse population. Of course, our neighborhood high schools are serving such significantly high populations of high-need special ed students, and again, the repeated feeling is that so many of our neighborhood high school principals feel like they're not getting the supports that they need, that they're not getting the types of investments to deal with their population to ensure that those students are not only felt welcome and included, but also are being groomed to succeed in diverse ways for them as well. And then do just want to mention for my colleagues, and the final comment for my panelists is that we have so many young people in DHS who are involved in the system, 1 in 5, and we have a desperate need to make sure that our city and district services coordinate. Myself and Councilwoman Blackwell will be absolute partners on making sure that happens, but we have to have the personnel in schools to make sure that we have those contacts so that every principal, every school, every child, and every family can be assured that we are doing everything on our end, and if there are gaps, that those are incidental, anecdotal things, but that they are not the fault of any systemic neglect on behalf that impact young people. So those were some of the hearings. I did want to update you on what our process has been for the last 3 months. We've been serious about trying to understand some of these findings, and it's with that spirit that we bring you back to City Council. We welcome you and would welcome our first testimony from SRC Commissioner Marge Neff. Thank you.
I don't have prepared testimony. I'm here to answer any questions that you have pertaining to the SRC.
Is there anybody who has prepared testimony today? Nope? Okay. Would any of my colleagues like to make any additional statements before we begin questions? So I'll open with Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for pulling together part 2